The meeting being called to order. The meeting house will come to order. Thank you to my friends in the wood shop for giving me an official gavel.
You didn't break it.
Nope, they assured me it wouldn't break. So I would call to order the Board of Education meeting for Monday, February 24th, 2020 for the School District of Milton. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our agenda is up next. Are there any changes, Mr. Dahman?
No changes to the agenda.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
One second.
Thank you. Motion from Diamond, seconded by Mike, to approve our agenda as you see it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Oh, this is going to be fun. Try not to get carried away. Action on the minutes is next.
That sounds pretty quick.
Exactly.
President Gavel, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes from February 10th as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion from Tom, seconded by Diamond, to approve the minutes from our previous meeting. Are there any questions about the minutes? Seeing none, we will, all in favor of approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That also passes. And as he's reaching for the mic is reaching for the mic, vouchers are up next.
I'll make a motion to approve Fund 10 vouchers totaling $192,412 for building and 40 vouchers on 49 totaling $1,198,265 as presented. Second.
Thank you. Motion from Mike, seconded by Rick, to approve the vouchers that you have on your report. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The vouchers are also approved. Public participation. We do have a gentleman signed up. We haven't had for a while, but we always welcome folks to share with us. Mr. Hessenauer, are you going to share with us?
Yes.
You were a little iffy, but welcome to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me this time. I am Jim Hessenauer, parent of a hockey player on the current team, and I'm also the assistant coach for the Milton High School team. I would just like to express at the moment the gratitude that the school district has provided with allowing us to have the hockey team, and I feel that this co-op that we have, if it does get approved, will definitely benefit our students here at Milton. It will lead to better competitiveness. It will lead to better training and skill development for these players. It also creates the opportunity for some of these students from a couple of school districts who don't have the ability to play for a high school hockey team to enjoy that high school experience. So in ending, just thank you for what you have supported, and hopefully support the co-op with the schools that will be mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only person signed up. Anyone else have anything they wanted to share? Otherwise, we will move on to our student council reports. And that looks like Miles.
I'm sorry to say, but I have nothing to report tonight. Last week was half day on Thursday. We had no meeting, and the week before, Mr. Thief was at a conference, so we had no ability to have a meeting at all the last 2 weeks. But we will have one this week, and I'll have some stuff for you by the next meeting.
Excellent. We look forward to that. Thank you, Miles. Legislative update. That would be Brian. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I got a couple things. The Assembly and the Senate have actually passed some bills, and as many know, that a lot of the Assembly bills, once they're passed, they have to go to the Senate. and then after that it goes to the governor's desk to sign. But a couple things that are on that have passed from the Assembly that pertain to education, public education is there's a Assembly Bill 422, and I kind of mentioned this in a previous update, but that bill is actually raising the legal age for sale, purchase, and possession of cigarettes and tobacco products from 18 to 21. So that has passed the Assembly, and I believe that's going to the Senate as the next stop. There's also a bill 459 that passed the Assembly, which is going to incorporate cursive writing back into the state English language arts standards. Right now, cursive writing is kind of a optional requirement for different districts, but this bill will actually require cursive writing back into the standard curriculum. And I think when Representative Verwink was here, you had mentioned that that was actually something that that he felt was probably going to come, because there were a lot of people that were concerned that if students don't know cursive writing, they can't read some of our historical documents, or at least that's a theory that he said that was kind of being floated around. There's also a Bill 662, which it passed the Assembly, which creates a 3-year online early learning pilot program for low-income children. And I won't go too much into that one, because that one's probably a little bit out of my realm. There's there was a bill 810, which makes school district and school financial information available to public. That passed and will head to the Senate. And this is a bill is essentially they'll have an 11-person committee to advise DPI on creation and design of financial information portals, so that the regular community members and the public can get more access and better access to that financial information, and hopefully be able to take a look at it and not have to have a decoder ring to figure out what's all that financial information is. Let's see, and that is about all I have. There is one other interesting legislative happenings that actually does affect our school board, and let me just try to get there. And here we go. And that is that there's a new law and statute that modifies the procedures for calling a special meeting of the school board. And in the past, basically, when I went over this, the big thing that I got out of it is prior, if a school board member wanted to call a special meeting, they would contact the school board clerk and request that meeting, and then after that, the statute was pretty much silent as to how, when, and if the clerk would actually set up a meeting date and time. Well, this gives you a little bit more clarity. They aren't very specific. They just say that the clerk has to establish a reasonable time and date and a place for the special meeting. But at least now that's in the law. And you know, before it wasn't, so sometimes somebody would want a special meeting and then it'd just be put on hold indefinitely. This kind of closes that loop. And in addition, it used to be 24-hour advance notice to have a special meeting, and now it can be up to no less than 2 hours. So if it's something that's very important and urgent, you can have a special meeting within a 2-hour notification. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. Just on a side note, I was actually at the Assembly session last Thursday on a different matter, but got a little guest of Mr. Brewing and got a little insight and a couple of takeaways that were very surprising. It was the last session of the year. They're done, which surprised me.
What part of the year? I mean,
Uh,
the spring or the
till
whole
No-
year?
Till November,
Jeez.
yeah, which I was stunned.
Okay.
They had a sort of a marathon session, they started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they went till 2 or 3 in the morning, you know, with a couple of breaks in there. And had 75 bills to potentially vote on, which it just made no sense to me. It's like, why don't you folks meet 3 or 4 more times and do this in a normal fashion? But way outside of my realm, just a very, very surprising inside look at what goes on in the state capitol. So anyway, not to digress. Presentations, student service overview, tier 2, Susan Probst and staff.
I probably sound a little bit like Mr. Snuffleupagus, but that's okay because Mr. Snuffleupagus was very big on social emotional learning. This is your second presentation. These presentations were a request from the board members to better understand our social and emotional learning and what happens in the district. In December, you heard from our counselors, we have 7 of them, and they shared the importance of the universal social and emotional learning, students learning to effectively navigate social environments, acknowledging and managing emotions, and developing and maintaining healthy relationships, with the idea that they would be in a better position to be successful both now and in the future. Tonight you're going to hear from our 3 of the 5 school psychs, and they're going to talk about Tier 2, and Tier 2 is all about responding to students who need more than Tier 1.
So it's not in my forehead. So like she said, there's 5 school psychologists in the district. 2 are not present. Crystal Schmid is at the middle school, and Brenda Wolf is at Northside, and they've been here for quite a few years. I'm Katie Grady. I'm brand new here this year. My kids have attended since 4K, and actually I see my early childhood providers here too. So I've been a part of the Milton community for a long time, but I'm new to the district this year. I'm serving West, Consolidated, and then I also do the 3-year-old transitions from birth to 3 and the 4K program. And then I'll let the others introduce themselves. I'm Danielle Marco. I'm the school psychologist at East and Harmony.
And I'm Karen Whiteman. I'm the school psychologist here at the high school.
And I can see even with heels, this is way too low for them. So maybe I'll just do this instead. So our goal is to kind of share with you the supports and services we provide to students who are at risk. Either they lack critical social emotional skills to be successful in school and in life, or they have negative behavioral patterns that are really going to interfere with their success. So these are those students who have not responded to our core supports that you heard about at our last presentation. Similarly to academic supports, we identify kids who are at risk academically in reading or in math, and we have a system to respond to them to hopefully get them back up to where they need to be. We do this also for our students, again, in that social emotional area. We identify students, it's not as clean necessarily as academics, right? We give direct assessments to see who's struggling in reading, who's struggling in math. Social, emotional, behavioral things are more gray, but some of the sources we use to find out who are these students who are at risk might be discipline records, a direct referral from a parent or a teacher, our own observations, we have survey info, we use attendance records and health reports to identify who they are. So what we tried to do, there are all kinds of acronyms in education that probably mean very little to people that aren't in it, and sometimes they are confusing to us as well. So what we decided to do to help you understand what are we doing for these kids that are at risk is kind of group them into types of supports. And obviously that looks really different when I'm working with a 4-year-old or Karen's working with a 17-year-old, but generally speaking, there's certain types of services that we all do provide. So we're going to try to organize it in that way so that there's some good takeaways for you guys. So one of the first areas that we have is called mentoring, and mentoring is really essentially built to get positive relationships within the school building and then also sometimes within the community. And so for some of our buildings, we have the staff to student mentoring program. I know at West, they are experimenting with some of the community members coming in and doing that mentoring program. At East, we have it's called the East Way Club. And what we have is we have staff that meet with the student. They try to at least one time a week. If they're not able to have lunch or play a game with them during that week, we encourage them to go and seek them out either before recess, during lunch, or send them a nice little note just to say, hey, hope you have a great week. But then on top of that, once a month, we all get together, everybody that's a part of the Eastway Club, staff and students, and we get together after school, and we have different activities that we do to build that relationship. So that's one of our ways that we help build relationships in our school, and it looks very different at each building, but that was one of our examples here at Milton East. Another pretty critical service that we provide for students at risk is consultation. Sometimes our point of intervention isn't with the student directly, but with the adults that are working with them. So we're trained in that. And so it might be direct assessment where we go in and observe the student on the playground, in the classroom, in social situations. We may be interviewing parents or teachers or others that have contact with the student. And then we sit down and do direct consultation where we're sitting with teachers, administrators, and parents. We're problem solving. We're helping them target what the needs might be and sharing out strategies that might be effective. We do direct PD with our teachers. Teachers get very little training in behavioral modification, social, emotional kinds of things. So we take that on as part of our responsibility to really help our teachers build not only their awareness, but actually their direct knowledge and skills and how to work with that. That's a whole nother layer that's just so critical, and they just don't get the same level of training that they do in some of the human learning and those kinds of things. And then outside providers, we collaborate with outside providers if we know and are aware that our students are working with an outside clinician, counselor. It's really important that we form a good connection with them. We are a huge resource to them because we see the student in a natural environment and we can really give a lot of feedback on what we're seeing. But also, we can help generalize. So if they're working on something in particular, we can help generalize those skills. If they're working on that in counseling, we can help those kinds of skills carry out in the classroom. And then we do things like medication monitoring. So if a psychiatrist decides to prescribe medications, again, we're a huge environment that we can really provide feedback. Are the medications having a positive effect? Are there side effects that we don't see to really help them titrate? So working closely with outside care providers is pretty critical. So a part of that consultation process, but also looking at our data, we also provide supports to students in small groups. These are some of the areas that we might help them. It ranges all the way from self-regulation to emotion management to grief, but it also includes some of the programs that we have used in the past for some of those things. And of course, every year it's different because we have different students every year, so it depends on what program that we use. But this allows us to give our students the tools that they need for their toolbox because they might not necessarily have those tools. But we gather students for these groups, just as Katie had talked about at the beginning, through a variety of sources, whether it's discipline referrals, teachers, parents, through that consultation process. But it looks very different at the K-3 level, the 4-6 level, at the middle school level, and then even at the high school level. And Karen's going to talk a little bit about some of the things that they're really looking forward to be able to do next year with switching over to trimesters.
So one of the challenges at the high school has been trying to do groups without having students miss class, which if you have students who have anxiety and then we say, guess what, you get to miss class, it doesn't exactly help their anxiety. So one of the things we're really looking forward to in the high school student services office is using our study flex time as part of our trimester schedule to be able to use that as a targeted time to be able to provide groups to students and determine what groups they need through the same kinds of methods we always have, but now we'll actually be able to deliver that better in the school setting. And what we're envisioning is that kids would either be able to self-select, that they could choose to come to a group, or we could talk to them directly and ask them to come to the group or suggest them to come to the group. And that would also be a resource that we could offer up to parents and say, these are things that we could offer at school setting during that time for your students.
So this is probably my favorite personal service that we provide. It's working one-to-one or knee-to-knee with kids. So you can have groups to teach social emotional skills, but you can also work one-to-one, knee-to-knee to support. This could be regularly scheduled, where you have a certain time each week that you meet with them, or it could be an as-needed. Kind of the process that we all work through is we're going to identify a primary concern that that child is having, whether a social emotional skill that they lack or a behavioral pattern that we'd like to interrupt. We decide what we want them to do instead, and then actively teach them how to do that. So it's like they're doing A, we want them to do B. We teach them and coach them how to do that, role play it, practice it, teach it explicitly, because we know that that's something that has to happen. And then we teach all those soft skills around it. So it might be teaching them about empathy or perspective taking or size of problems. And then we set goals with them, so we kind of collect a baseline of where they're at. We set goals with them, like you would do with an academic area or an athletic area. And then we have a system set up so that we can monitor their growth. They get a lot of feedback, they can see their growth, then we reinforce that positive change. The power really lies in the teaching. Kids, like in anything else, we have to teach them what they need to know or be able to do. But instead of academics, it's social emotional. So as part of the individual supports that they have, we also have accommodations, and some of those include the behavior tools that they might have learned in that individual setting. So if there's something that, a phrase that they've learned or they've worked on, or they have a visual cue that they have to know that, oh, I have to stop and think. We might have those placed at their seat, in their lockers, but it allows us to provide some of those individualized accommodations, but also transfer the knowledge that they're learning in those small groups or in the individual setting as well. So some of these might come out of those need and eat. It might also come out of that consultation process with teachers, and that they can include different behavior supports tools and sensory breaks, whether it's having a movement break, and we have some different pictures up on the screen that are in our buildings that students are able to use and access. Visual supports, like I talked about, whether it's a behavior management tool from the small group or individual setting that they're working on. It might be a visual schedule just so that they can see what's going on or what's going to happen next. Or it might be an alternative workplace. So maybe they need a little bit of extra room on the carpet. So they lay out on their tummies with a clipboard and they're able to move around more. Or maybe it's they need to stand while they're working, so they might have a standing desk or a stool that allows them to have a little bit of movement. So those are some of the things that we're able to provide them within the classroom and outside of the classroom as well. On top of that, we have other at-risk supports which didn't necessarily fit into some of the areas, but one of the areas that we have is the morning transition support. And really, this is kind of a soft landing for our students. Whether it's a breakfast club or mindful morning, it just gets kids regulated and ready for the day that's ahead. Because mornings can be chaotic and you're busy trying to get everything ready, and then you go out to recess and you've got a lot of different kids out there. It just allows them to take a moment to get ready for the rest of the day. And then we also have some homework clubs that are available for our students as well if they're having difficulties with some of the homework. I know that some of the new math can be very difficult. So Northside and the middle school have started some homework clubs there too.
Any questions, thoughts?
I'm hearing none. Thank you very much. That's very insightful. Okay, our next presentation is from Carrie Bradley, who will help us learn more about some of our school finance,
We are gonna-
specifically revenue limits.
Continue on our journey exploring school finance, and again I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about school finance and help us learn about the system we're operating in and work on our common language as we talk about school finance issues. So last time we talked about revenues and revenue limits, and we started talking about building the base, and I think the exciting topic for tonight as we continue is we're going to talk about exemptions to the revenue limit. Another name for that is getting additional levy authority through controlled revenues. So if you would turn to the first slide, please. Okay. And you've seen this before, and I just want to recall from last time, that when it comes to our general fund revenue, our Fund 10 revenue, 85% of our revenues are controlled, meaning that they're controlled by revenue limits. We also last time began talking about data used in the revenue limit, and we talked about the first three items, reminding that prior year controlled revenue is the base, and that's the prior year spending from general aid and levy. Our membership, and which is our full-time equivalency or resident FTE, impacts us to calculate a dollar amount per pupil. We briefly reviewed the increments that number is increased by, and we stopped there, and now we are up to exemptions. So, exemptions allow for additional revenue limit authority. They can take school board action, or they can be automatic per state statute. Just as a reminder, here's the data that I just mentioned that you reviewed last time, right? 1 through 7, we're calculating our initial revenue limit, and again, as I had said, we look at prior year base revenue, membership, those increments that we spoke about, and then we land on line 5, which is our maximum revenue per member of $9,700 this year, times our current 3-year average, gets us to the 34 million on line 7, which you have seen before, I'm sure, in the worksheet that you're given. So the next slide is going to start talking about exemptions. And they typically provide additional levy authority, and in 2 cases it's actually a reduction in levy authority. There are 5 possible recurring exemptions, and there are 7 possible non-recurring exemptions that are increases. So then the next slide will show our Milton data. Okay, so on line 8, that line 8 is the sum of A through E, and those would be recurring exemptions. If an exemption is recurring, the board has the opportunity to levy those dollars, and then those dollars will show up in our base the following year. And that's how they become recurring, okay? That you were given levy authority, you used it, and that levy authority will follow you into the future until such time as your base calculation, you can actually erode the base over time, depending upon circumstances, but it becomes part of your base in the future, so long as the dollars are levied. So on line 9 then, is that 55,000, which is for a transfer of service, which was added to our base authority, is how I refer to it on line 9. And then 10 is a list of all of the non-recurring exemptions. And so on 10A, the first one that we're familiar with is the referendum that was passed in 1617, was for $2.5 million. So for 5 years, from fall of 16, the board has additional levy authority of $2.5 million. Okay. 10B is the declining enrollment exemption, and if you are in declining enrollment, you get that exemption every year. It's one-time money though, so that doesn't follow you into the future. So when they do the calculation of the base, it's that money from general aid and tax levy less any non-recurring exemptions. Okay, so the non-recurring do not follow you into the future. 10C is energy efficiency exemption, and right now there's that 1,000-year moratorium on that, which I think, Brian, you mentioned a couple meetings ago that they're thinking about lifting the 1,000-year moratorium. And that is a district can get an exemption to get additional levy authority to pay for projects if certain requirements are met. The adjustment for refunded or rescinded taxes of about $20,000 there has to do with money that we had to pay back to taxpayers because of usually a change in their property valuation. And we will get a letter in November from the Department of Revenue indicating that certain property owners had challenged their assessments through the court system, and a finding was in their favor, and we have to pay back because they were overtaxed. And that's like less than 5 years old as an exemption. It used to be done as a chargeback outside the limit, but now they brought it inside the limit and you get an exemption. E is prior year open enrollment, and that's uncounted pupils. So those would be students that we didn't get to count in the fall when we did our tax levy. And based on how we report our open enrollment and membership and counting or not counting, that's an opportunity, since we're going to have to pay for the students, to give us a chance to levy for them. So that will follow us through. F is actually a negative adjustment. If we are found to have used Fund 80, which is a community service fund, for things that aren't eligible, there could be a consequence for that, and that's a negative adjustment. That energy efficiency exemption could probably also be negative if you, there's a couple ways that can happen, but we don't need to go into the details since we don't use that. G only affects, I think, a Schwabenon, so I don't think we're going to be using G. We don't have any brownfields that qualified per the statute. And then H and I are vouchers for private schools, and one is through the Wisconsin Public Choice Program, and the other one would be through the Special Needs Scholarship Program for private schools. So right now, we were given additional levy authority of about $50,000, and what will happen in June, our last state aid payment, we're going to have a deduction to make those voucher payments for private schools. So in order to not take dollars, the levy authority is granted to the board. Your other option would be to reduce your expenditures for our public school population to pay for the voucher. So in order to pay for the voucher program, the legislature determined that school districts would have a reduction in their aid payments, and that they would be given additional levy authority to do that. So it's an exemption, it's a one-time thing. Now some of these one-time things will come back again next year, right? But that's for next year's one-time thing, not this year's one-time thing. And so when you sum it all up, you get to line 11, and that is our revenue limit with all exemptions, which is almost 37 million. Good, good. If you go to, oh, you got it. Very good, thank you. So if you recall the last time, I had a slide, and again, we're on the, it's 1819, even though I was just talking 1920, because if you remember, the revenue limit is not final until May. That's when the final calculation is done. So rather than using current year data, I'm using prior year final data. Right? And if you recall, last time we did the ranking, and it was the revenue limit further up in the formula before any exemptions were applied, right? It was our calculation plus the base increments times our current membership. And on that calculation, I think that we were ranked at 8. Okay. If we look at all the exemptions that we have, including our 2.5 million, our ranking moves up to 6, and it looks like we had an additional about $725 through those non-recurring exemptions. So that's a lot of information. I can tell it was fun and exciting as always. Right? But do you have any questions before I conclude? I don't think there's really any surprises here, right? You've all looked at the worksheet, and really all I'm doing is kind of chugging through it and giving you more detail this time in shorter bursts, hopefully, than the marathon meeting. So our takeaways are that the current year is based on prior year, which I think you've heard me say every single time I have been up here, right? So our current year's aids are based on prior year expenditures. And our initial revenue limit calculation is also based on that prior year spending from taxes and general aid. The current year is adjusted by exemptions, and we looked at the impact of that on a per member or per resident FTE basis. And as you are well aware, but I have it on the slide, that this is, we have 1 year left of additional levy authority for operations with the $2.5 million referendum.
Very good. Any questions for Carrie?
Just to keep you on the edge of your seats, we're going to start talking about state aids next time.
We can hardly wait.
I'll be here.
Thank you. You're very gracious.
Oh, thank you very much. And that concludes our presentations, although the next one is along that line in a recurring fashion, a referendum update. And I believe Mr. Huffman is here, so we'll invite Mike up to the podium and share with us what has happened and what will be happening in our referendum world.
Good evening. So my report tonight is kind of like exploring school finance. It's some detailed information that a limited audience can get excited about. No offense, no offense. As a treasurer of the school board, I'm really excited about it. So as noted in my report that's in your packet, there were some very, very detailed features of the project development that have occurred in the last month. Very, very important details. So as I noted in there, spent more than 6 hours with Stephen and a number of other people just looking at details. 6 hours talking about door hardware, hinges, door guards, door handles, keyways, things like that. 6 hours. Very, very important though, because it's a piece that often isn't installed right, and it's expensive to change when you come in and find out that the function of that hardware doesn't meet the operational need, and we have to change it later during the construction phase. So to go through it in great detail in the design phase, very, very important. Another aspect similar to that is that we spent 2 days in meetings doing a detailed page turn of the high school design. So you'll recall likely that we did this with the elementary school and the middle school. So now we rolled out the high school, which of course is a bigger project, and went page by page. Hats off to our design team. They brought in all the sub-consultant disciplines, so electrical designer, HVAC designer, civil engineer, architecture, of course, and on down the line, and went space by space and explained the features of their side of the design, and we critiqued it, and it was valuable, and there was times where we were able to say it needs to be slightly different. Nothing big, nothing earth-shattering, but important to comb through that and find any problems before they finalize the construction documents that will go out to bid for the high school. So tedious but important aspects. Emmons Business Center, I think, has become a very good partner for us in the furniture. There's been a number of meetings trying to determine our need for the spaces. This will culminate in cost estimates across the board, even though it's the the elementary school that we've got to pull the trigger on ordering furniture the earliest, but we want to see the total impact to the budget on furniture, and that process is going very well. Then getting into a little bit more exciting stuff, we are out on the street now, seeking bids for the middle school project. Those bids are due on the 10th. Steve Clavin spent quite a bit of time today calling some subcontractors to make sure we generate interest. Our focus as your representative is more concentrated on the work that J.P. Cullen is bidding on. So we have looked at those specific work scopes and said, we've got to get out into the contractor community and generate interest so that we have competition for the ones that J.P. Cullen are bidding on. And I think that's going very well. The walkthroughs of the space that Cullen has conducted have been quite successful. We've got quite a bit of interested contractors, so I think we're going to have a good bid day there. As far as the construction progress out in the field, if you've been by East, you'll likely see that the walls are up now, and the next step there is to bring in the steel joists to set on top of the walls. So that's good progress there. Over at West, the masonry crew is moving their tent around to heat and build walls. And then out at Harmony, work is underway. In fact, when I was here on Friday, I believe it was, I observed their ground heater. So they're trying to pull the frost out of the ground over at Harmony so they can get their concrete slab down and then build their walls up. So haven't had to heat the ground on the other two facilities, but that ground heater is out there and employed over at Harmony. I think that's all I wanted to say on construction update. I did want to go back to your prior meeting. I wasn't here. Steve gave the report at that time, and he was asked by a member of the audience, I believe, what would happen on the high school if our bids came in over budget. And I don't know exactly what he said there, but I think he missed one point that I wanted to go back and catch. And that is that we have built in alternates into the bid. So we've discussed this previously with the middle school. There's some spaces in the middle school that may get renovated or may not, depending on how the bids come out. So those are defined cost alternates within the bid process. We have the same thing at the high school. Just by way of example, we're building a loading dock for the kitchen. And an alternate is to take that space to 2-story, and that would provide for an expansion of the weight room. So if we don't experience a very positive bid day, that's an alternate that we likely would not take. We've got a couple others in there. We call them kind of pressure relief valves. So I just wanted you to know that if Steve didn't touch on that, that's a key feature on how we manage the variability of bid day. Any questions on that or anything else in my report?
I'm hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Huffman.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, committee reports. We have one, the Finance Committee, and related topics for Mike and Diamond. I think Diamond is going to do this, I was informed. First up is discussion and possible action on our 5-year capital maintenance and improvement plan and vehicle equipment replacement schedule.
So we have Stephen up here. Just kind of an entry into that for everyone on the board. One of the big things we talked about is how we could capitalize on our referendum dollars and make sure we're getting the most out of that as we could. So one of the things we addressed during our strategic planning initiatives was making sure we were also trying to address those big ticket items that were on our capital 5-year plan that we probably weren't going to be able to get to with the dollars that we had allocated every year. So the 5-year plan has changed a lot since the last time we saw it. So Stephen did a really great job of walking through that, and he prepared a great presentation for us today.
Thank you, Diamond. And just to go back to Mike's point, I was dreaming about door hardware, lock sets, door finishes. So if you need to know what any door color finishes in this any new space, I'm your man. But thank you for the introduction to this, Diamond. This is a very exciting rendition of the capital maintenance and improvement plan. And as Diamond said too, we walked through this on Monday in great detail, but excited to present this to the full board as well. So I was going to start off this presentation just to highlight 8 years of previous investments that the board has made into capital projects, both through the capital maintenance and improvement plan. The board has also chose to do projects outside of that, in addition to the capital maintenance and improvement plan throughout the years. And each fiscal year, we also highlighted a couple of the larger, more noticeable projects that we did in each fiscal year. You notice in 2013-14, that was a low year, and then we've been bumped up pretty much ever since to the $800,000 plus range. In 2017-18, 18-19, and the current fiscal year as well. We highlighted the expenditures in Fund 10 and also the expenditures in Fund 80, as highlighted in 2017-18, the Fund 80 Shilberg Park parking lot project that took place that year. And they also split out in the current fiscal year and the previous, the money out of Fund 10 that supported the short-term pool repair project. Also wanted to highlight the maintenance project, the deferred maintenance projects that the capital referendum is tackling. So we're pretty much touching every single building that the district has, and those are a list of the projects that the capital referendum is going to take care of off of this list. All right, now for the exciting stuff, proposed projects. At East, we're going to be replacing the fire alarm system. We're going to have to put a new fire alarm system in the new addition, and this would be extending that new fire alarm throughout the existing building. We're going to renovate those two very beautiful restrooms that you see on the right, and we have some wall tile available for anybody looking to do some home decorating if you'd like. And also replacing a few concrete slabs out in the front entrance. At West, we'll be doing some restroom renovations in the back side as well. And again, these restroom renovations are not only giving these bathrooms a refresh, but are also going to make the restrooms ADA compliant. Consolidated, this will be extending the new fire alarm through the existing building. Those pictures shown there show the original fire alarm system that's still in place from 1957, and that consists of 6 pull stations in that central box there, so an antique. At Harmony, we're going to be replacing the intercom system. That's replacing it with the CareHawk system, similar to what we've put in all the other elementary schools, so that would make all the elementaries functioning on the same system. And we also are going to tackle roof replacement, sections 1, 3, and 4. The major sections there are the existing building, and the original building, and also tackling the roof section over top of the library. North side, we're approaching the remaining asphalt replacement as a 2-year cycle. The area outlined in blue is the area that we're looking at doing this coming summer, and the area outlined in red would be for the following summer. Middle school up front office remodel. The picture on the right is the way it currently sits. The picture on the left shows what we are hoping to make that space. If you've been to Milton West over the last year or so, it'll be very similar to what we did there. At the high school, we are looking at refinishing the main gym floor, replacing flooring in the 3 science classrooms that were built in 1999. That's the picture shown on the right of the beautiful tile condition. We are looking at adding a 3,500-pound elevator in the new STEM edition and decommission the existing elevator. This project will be a tremendous value to the new edition, and just to highlight back a couple of years ago, we've always had adding an elevator in the existing shaft that was built in 1999, but that shaft is undersized and would have required a custom elevator to be able to make that work. We'd be able to take advantage of the building being built and starting from scratch and getting an elevator that the building truly needs to function going forward. And also replacing the auditorium entrance doors. Those are the doors from the cafeteria into the auditorium. And lastly, at Shilberg Park, we are looking at replacing the existing playground equipment. That playground equipment was original to the park in 1998. We found out over the last few years that many of the parts are in need of being replaced. That playground has been a very hot commodity over its life, and to bring this playground back up to speed, both parts-wise, the decking needs to be refurbished. It would require an investment almost greater than replacing it as a whole. As I mentioned before, and it's not handicap accessible currently, and we would donate the existing equipment to a group called Kids Around the World. They take old playgrounds, especially the real bones of it, and they take it and ship it to a needy community around the world. they sent us photos of a playground that got shipped to Nepal, Mexico. So it would be really cool to have that playground still live on somewhere else. This is just a summary of what we're looking at replacing it with. Still 2 areas, one for your younger kids on the right side, one for your older kids, 5 to 12 on the left. It would offer some new opportunities and also accessible. And that would be a Fund 80 expenditure, just like the parking lot project was a few years ago. And in working with Rich and Carrie, the Fund 10 total that we were targeting for next fiscal year was a total of $900,000 worth of projects. And this slide here shows a summary of proposed expenditures per location. And then just to highlight as well, we're in a unique situation with the capital referendum going on, that we're able to take advantage of economies of scale. So the projects that we would be taking advantage of would be the projects highlighted up there: the east fire alarm, east bathroom rental, west bathroom rental, consolidated fire alarm, and the Harmony intercom. And as we highlighted when we were going for approval of the elementary school GMP, that if those projects were to be tackled as individual projects, all on their own, nobody mobilized on site, the call-in estimate to complete those would be about $526,000. By having these projects bid and hopefully take place along with the summer blitz work this summer, the cost to do those projects with them on site mobilized is just over $235,000. So by doing these along with the projects and crews already on site, you'd save approximately $290,000. So those are the projects. Do you have any questions about the projects before I dive into vehicles?
Stephen, I have a question about the original elevator that we have now. Is that still operational?
It is still operational, and it is in need of some pretty significant repairs to be able to keep that going, say, for another 5 to 10 years. Also, by decommissioning that that there's going to be a new elevator that's part of the event entrance, which will be just 50 yards down the hall. And by getting rid of our existing elevator, it'll create a more open flow through connecting the event entrance to the academic side of the building as well. And a big advantage of adding a new elevator in what will be the new STEM edition will be the kids and kids, staff, community that need to use that elevator on this, the west side of the building won't have to travel approximately 600 feet one direction to use an elevator to go from say a lower level STEM classroom to the elevator and back is almost 1,200 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I can hop into vehicles and equipment if there's no other questions on the projects. So we have 3 different items on the vehicle and equipment replacement schedule. One is for this current fiscal year, and that would be the addition of a utility cart for Schoberg Park. We have $5,000 worth of offsetting revenue for that piece of equipment, so really the total cost for that in Fund 80 would be less $5,000. And that would be not any additional budget money. We already have that at Schoberg Park's budget currently. And for next fiscal year, we'd be looking at replacing our 2009 Suburban with another Ford Transit, a 10-passenger van, and purchasing a scrubber for Consolidated.
Okay, are you through, Stephen?
That's
Does
it.
anyone have questions?
Stephen, for the utility cart for Schoberg,
Yep.
that's for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. Is there any reason why we didn't approve that at the beginning, like last year at this time?
This is kind of a need that came up throughout the year. We actually had one of our utility carts die. And then we had some donations come in towards the utility cart. And we also had a project that we were going to do over there, a restoration of a few softball diamonds. And that contractor that we were going to work with on that project went belly up. So it kind of freed up some funds to take care of replacing this cart this fiscal year yet.
So it was definitely, sounds like it's an unexpected expense, but as you had mentioned, it's come from Fund 80?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and that, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not within the, well, Fund 80 is part of our overall budget of the 36 million?
Not that we were talking about, no, the levy.
Yeah.
Fund 80
That's,
is in addition to our control
okay,
revenue.
that's what I thought. I thought they were separate, but I wasn't, okay.
You are correct, they're separate. And Shelburne Park is our community park.
Yep.
And so we are allowed to appropriately fund expenses for our community park using our community service fund levy.
So the upshot, if I get this correctly, then by taking this out of Fund 80, it's not going to decrease our budget for providing educational services, et cetera, for
School operations, correct.
perfect.
Right.
I thought that was the answer, but I wanted to make sure.
Anybody else have questions? If not, this is an action item, we'll need a motion. I think it's suggested in our packet there. Someone help me.
I'll make a motion to approve the 5-year capital maintenance and improvement plan and vehicle equipment replacement plan, specifically the projects and equipment outlined for the 2019, 2020, and 2021 fiscal years as presented.
Second?
Thank you. Motion from Diamond, seconded by Tom, as you just heard, for that capital maintenance and improvement and vehicle replacement. Are there any questions on the motion?
I got a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
I guess I would like to have the dollar amount, the 900,000 and the 85,000 put in the motion, because if someone's reading the Courier and they're reading the minutes and they say, well, what's this mean? They don't know what it means, but they have a dollar figure. And it is, we are starting to spend next year's budget, so I just believe it should be in there, so. I just asking to put that in there.
Do you want to offer that as an amendment to the motion on the floor?
I will, Alfred.
Okay, is there a second for that?
No second.
Okay, thank you. Motion, or an amendment proposed and seconded to add to the original motion the dollar figures, I think, that were in Stephen's report of 900,000 general fund revenues or Fund 10 and 85,000 for Fund 80. Questions on the amendment? All in favor of amending the motion as I just said, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is amended. Which brings us back to the motion on the floor that you just heard with that amendment. Are there any questions on the entire motion?
This is, that Diamond, it also includes that vehicle, that park, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the capital maintenance and improvement and the vehicle replacement that Stephen outlined.
I totally agree with the list that Stephen came up with. I'm just concerned about the dollar figure.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the aforesaid motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Don't think of it that way.
So our next agenda item that we had talked about at committee was Carrie had brought to our committee the long-term capital improvement trust fund, Fund 46. And this is something that at the board level we had talked about previously, and then it's appeared to be a tabled item. So Carrie brought it back, and we just kind of discussed moving forward, and Carrie looking into the things that we need to do, and working with Stephen on the things that we would need him to do. And it's something that Carrie will be bringing forward to the full board for discussion and possible action on later on this year. So something to look forward to. And the purpose of that fund is to start making some long-term investments into maintenance projects moving forward. And that will conclude my report.
I'd just like to say, Carrie, that I'm very excited to have a discussion on Fund 46. Thank you.
All right. No action needed on that tonight. So if there's nothing else on that, we will move on to new business. That brings up Ms. Carrie Bradley back to the podium. Operational referendum timeline.
So included in your board information, and I'm not anywhere near as tall as the person who came before me, is it's an informational item, and there are timelines if the board should choose to go to referendum, and the goal was to get that information in front of you so that you can see what the timelines are. When we talked about the current revenue limit information, we had talked about the 2.5 million. As we're planning our budget for next year and into the future, next year is the last money that those funds are available. And so this is, as much as anything, a heads up. And then as we continue to work on the budgets in the next couple months, we'll bring some more information forward with regard to need.
Excellent. Any questions on our timeline relative to our budget? All righty, stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that will turn it over to Mr. Hamill, and we are moving up to discussion and possible action on 2020-2021 Boys Hockey Co-op Program.
All right, good evening. I think the last two board meetings we've had home hockey games. I'd just like to announce that next year I think we have 5 Monday home hockey games, which means we'll be well rested from Sundays. So, which brings me to the point of we need to be well rested because of the numbers. I think we skated 1 game at the end of this year with 8 skaters and a goalie. Is that right? After some injuries and sickness and bad timing is what it turned out to be. So, for a few years we've been 3 years, I guess it's been, we've been co-oping with Fort Atkinson. Fort Atkinson has sent us 1 student athlete to play hockey. I'm not sure that student will even be here next year, but they do have some kids in 7th graders this year and beyond, with some numbers coming. But our numbers are going to be around that 15 mark. Could be a few more, could be a few less. It all depends. And so I've been contacted by several schools who would like to send kids to play hockey on our team as a co-op. Evansville, Williams Bay, and Bigfoot, in addition to Fort Atkinson. And tonight I'm going to request that the school board please approve that addition to this co-op. And here are a couple reasons why, and this is why I'm worried about what numbers we'll get next year. We have a varsity hockey team. And so when we get some 9th graders who come out, if you can imagine putting our 9th graders on the football program and making them play varsity football, people would be screaming, particularly the 9th graders. So I'm worried about safety of these kids, for one, but I'm also worried about the experience. I mean, by having a co-op our size, then with adding these schools, we're Division I. And some people worry about us being Division I. We got to play against the big schools. Well, you know what? It doesn't really matter. It's about the state tournament at that point, and the chances of winning the state tournament, only 1 team does. And so I'm really concerned about the 24-game, 3-month season experience for our kids, way more than that tournament experience. Nice to win a game or 2. That's a lot of fun, but 3 months and 24 games is a lot of time and energy to have a great experience. If our kids are on the bench because it's not safe to put them in, they're not having as good of an experience. So by adding what we could potentially add about 10 kids, maybe 8, maybe 12, just depends on if they want to follow through and participate as if they've said they would. We could be in the mid-20s, and that would give us enough for a junior varsity team, which would allow our young kids to stay out and play in a manner of where they can compete safely with kids their own age and skill level. And I think that's really important, and it's really important for sustaining our program. We have some really good hockey players, and we have some good young hockey players, and when you look at Janesville Youth Hockey, where many of our kids grow up playing, many of the good players are Milton kids. Hess can attest to that. So I'd like to keep those kids coming to Milton to school because they can play junior varsity hockey and then varsity hockey. Financially, we'd charge, just like we did Fort Atkinson, it's $600 to play hockey. That's our hockey fee. The reason we went with that years ago because it was similar to the Janesville hockey fee. We didn't want to lose them to someone else because we charged $2,000 or something. So we kept it similar to the local fees. So everyone would play would be paying $600, whether they're junior varsity or varsity player. Our ice time is not going to go up too much as far as hours needed because we're going to practice them all together at one time anyway. So our practice ice time would be the same as it would be normally. So those fees will actually come and help pay for some transportation because many of our JV games would be away. But it also help pay for some officials and ice time. So if we could get a few home hockey games, that would be great. The one other advantage I'd given you in my Hamel docs, I don't have the presentation to put up like the young kids do, but I mentioned in here that adding new communities also adds new fundraising opportunities. And hockey is expensive and it's about fundraising, and to bring in some new families from some new communities who want to get behind and back kids who want to play hockey gives us an opportunity potentially to raise some more funds for the program. So just another benefit outside of what we're benefiting our kids. So with that, if you have any questions on adding these extra 3 teams or 3 schools to our co-op, I'm happy to answer those. Yes. So there's a lot of questions because you've probably been reading in the paper about Janesville talking about building a 2-sheet rink. And I've met with groups for the last, say 2 years or so talking about that. And is Milton interested in skating in Janesville, like at the mall if they build it there? I said, yeah, very much. We're very much interested in that. One of the things we really need though is a locker room space because hockey's got all that equipment, and when you're done skating, you like to hang it up to dry versus put it in your trunk and then pull it out the next day frozen. So, so we have some things we really need. Stoughton is not that far away. And especially finally that the interstate is from here to there, from Newville to there, is a little safer, I believe now. I mean, there's 3 lanes of crazies instead of just 2. So. And they've been very good to work with, and we don't have any problems. It's just a 25-minute drive versus a short drive to Janesville. I don't like our kids driving there, so we transport them ourselves. In Janesville, I think we'd let them drive because we're all used to that, and parents are used to that. So, yeah. So we're gonna. From Walworth County, they would drive here. They would drive here. They would meet us there. If they're JV kids, there may be some adjusted practice expectations maybe for some of those kids. Maybe they wouldn't make every Thursday practice or something. And we do dry land, so we don't practice every single night. We have weightlifting or we have watching video and stuff like that. So that saves some time, some ice time costs, and it's other valuable stuff, part of coaching and part of the experience as well.
Okay, any other questions? That's an action item. We need an approval here for Mr. Hamel to proceed.
I make a motion, we approve the request to include the 3 additional teams as our co-op members.
Second. Thank you. Motion from Tom, seconded by Rick, to approve the proposal to expand our hockey co-op as you heard. Any questions? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
On you go.
And then the second one is the gymnastics with Edgerton. We've had 2 years now. The girls have really taken a lot of pride into the Milton Edge gymnastics. You don't know that we have 2 schools competing together. They really have become one team. And talking to Christine Farnsworth, she said, I can't imagine not having those kids from Edgerton. So to me, that's a really positive thing. Again, talking about the experience for all these kids. They get along very well. And so we'd like to just continue that. We really needed those kids this year as, again, like hockey, we had a lot of illness, we had injuries, and the numbers, we needed every kid we could get healthy out on the mat for gymnastics. And if you've been watching and reading, the gymnastics team has been very successful, second in conference. They've been really pushing some of their top scores. They're like the 5th and 6th highest scores in school history, so they've done very well. And Edgerton has contributed to the success as well, not only in individual success, but pushing some of our own kids to do better. So that, again, financially, again, Edgerton pays $500 per student for every kid that comes over. I believe it's 3 this year. We had 5 last year. I believe we'll have the same 3 girls next year.
Very good. Any other questions on the proposed gymnastics co-op?
I'll make a motion to approve the 2021 girls gymnastics co-op as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion from Diamond, seconded by Mike, to approve our gymnastics co-op. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are co-op.
Great, thank you, and I'll need Joe's and Rich's after the
Yep.
signatures.
Thank you, Mr. Hamel. New business D is drawing of lots for the ballot order for our spring general election. As you know, we have 4 candidates that succeeded at the primary level, and we will figure out an order to put them on the ballot.
Do we have someone from the audience who would like to come and pull the ballots out?
Mr. Leon.
help us
Excellent.
out here tonight.
You pull Cubs out of that ballot box, I'll know something's wrong.
So is it the first one pulled or the first
pulled is
listed?
one.
First, correct.
So, first on the ballot is David Holterman. Next up. Second on the ballot will be Shelley Kroll-Hinking. Third is Karen Hall. I'll get this one, Wilson, thanks. And then that leaves Mike Hoffman, number 4. Thank you, Wilson.
Very good, yes, thank you, Mr. Leon. That concludes the new business. Miscellaneous. A is our action on staffing reports. That is in your packet. I believe it is one addition of softball coach and 1 resignation.
I'll make a motion to approve the staff report presented.
A second.
Thank you. Motion from Rick, seconded by Tom, to approve the staffing report that you see. Are there any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Staffing report is approved. Gifts and donations.
I'd like to approve the gifts and donations of $1,750.65 for Greg.
Second.
Thank you. Motion from Mike, seconded by Diamond, to approve our gifts and donations that you've heard. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Gratitude of the district. Meeting dates. Do we have stuff we need to schedule, Mr. Donovan?
We don't have anything that we need to schedule tonight. We will need an HR committee meeting coming up in about 2 weeks. It wouldn't need to be this week, and possibly not next week. We have a staff meeting tomorrow where we're going to sort out some of the things that we need to talk through with the HR committee. So if we do need to get that in before the next board meeting, we'll contact the HR committee folks, but it might be after the next board meeting. And then the next regular board meeting is on Monday, March 9th.
I have exhausted my agenda. Thank you. Motion from Brian, seconded by Mike, to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Because that's what you're hitting for.
See you next time. Yeah,